Ever been at a swanky party, glass of wine in hand, but all you really wanted to do was smash that glass right in someone's face? Hey there, the name's Emma Parker. I'm 33 and a Manhattanite, through and through. I'm married to Luke Bennett, 35, a hotshot financier and the second son of the Bennett family you know, the ones who basically run a financial dynasty in New York. Today, I'm going to tell you about a cold Brooklyn night where I left my 5-year marriage behind. All for the one thing I wanted most: freedom. If you're listening to this story, take it from me. Don't ever let anyone turn your dream of being a wife into a cage. That night, I was standing on a Brooklyn rooftop, the wind whipping through my black dress, a glass of red wine in my hand. Around me, the city lights sparkled, soft jazz was playing, and the congratulations were flowing sweet as sugar, but cold as ice. They called me the trophy wife. Good for sitting around and drinking, but not for giving him a kid. It started with a look. The mocking look on my sister-in-law Madeline's face, Luke's brother, James's wife, as she proudly held her new, chubby baby boy. A baby I, Emma Parker, ached for with every fiber of my being but couldn't have. Right there, in the middle of a lavish baby shower, I felt like I was on a stage, and everyone's eyes were fixed on my flat, empty stomach. Luke and I had been married for 5 years. 5 years of hopeless treatments, painful tests, hormone shots that left my body feeling like a stranger's, and piles of useless supplements. The result was always the same: a big fat 0, a cruel sentence from fate itself. Meanwhile, to them, the Bennetts, the people who could just hold hands and produce a perfect heir, I'd become a thorn in their side, the perfect excuse to drag me out and shame me, turning me into a spectacle for the entire family and the New York elite. They didn't know that right then. All I wished was for that glass of wine to shatter, breaking the invisible chains that had held me for 5 years. I used to think Luke would protect me. But on that night in Brooklyn, he chose his family. When Luke and I walked into the rooftop party, I still held on to a tiny bit of hope. The twinkling Manhattan skyline in the distance seemed to beckon me, and the soft jazz was lulling tired souls to sleep. I wore a sexy black dress that Luke had once praised, and I felt his hand squeeze mine. "Try to have fun, Emma," he whispered, but his eyes were filled with worry and a hint of fear, not for me but for himself. I looked at the red wine in my hand, the color like my own blood, and listened to the hollow fake laughter echoing through the room. In that moment, a cold truth hit me. Fun was the biggest luxury I couldn't afford here, surrounded by people who had stolen my smile and my peace. And I knew that tonight, Luke would never be my shield. He had taken his family's side, leaving me all alone with the wolves. The first jab of the night came from my mother-in-law, Ruth Bennett. "Maybe you should hold little Max to see what it feels like." The first insult, like a sharp knife, came directly from my mother-in-law, Ruth Bennett. Over the smooth jazz and the luxurious atmosphere, her voice rang out, full of fake concern. "Maybe you should hold little Max to see what it feels like, Emma." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my reaction. I knew it wasn't a suggestion, but a direct hit at my deepest pain. I managed a strained, lopsided smile. My hands trembled as I held the tiny newborn Max. The smell of fresh milk and the baby's warmth made my heart ache. Just then, Madeline leaned in, her voice a condescending whisper. "Be careful, Emma, he's fragile. I'm sure you're not used to it." She smirked, her eyes twisting the knife in the wound. The eyes of everyone at the party fell on me, a 3-year-old woman, childless, and by their standards, completely useless. I felt exposed, judged, paraded around as living proof of the Bennett family's failure. The pain and humiliation rose in my throat, but I tried to keep a calm facade, holding myself together. Luke looked at me and just smiled. He didn't say a word to defend me, not a single word of empathy. In the moment, I felt completely stripped bare by the judging eyes of the room. I looked for a glimmer of hope from my husband. But Luke just stood there, facing me, and gave a weak, shallow smile. He didn't say a word, not a single word of defense, not one word of sympathy to stop the insults being hurled at me. His silence was more painful than any slur. That smile will haunt me forever. I handed baby Max back to Madeline, feeling like I was returning a burden that wasn't mine to bear. I grabbed a glass of red wine from a passing waiter's tray and walked straight out to the balcony. I leaned against the cold metal railing, taking a deep breath of the freezing Brooklyn air. The streetlights below flickered, a sparkling carpet that felt impossibly far away. In that moment, I thought, why am I still standing here? Why am I still putting up with this? The question echoed in my mind, with no answer. They didn't stop. They wanted me to break. I was still leaning on the railing, feeling the cold Brooklyn wind on my scalp, trying to breathe away the fury boiling in my chest. But they didn't stop. They wanted me to collapse, to cry, to admit my failure in front of everyone. A ridiculously loud laugh erupted as Luke's brother James raised his glass high. His eyes flickered toward me, full of taunting triumph. "Cheers to the Bennett family getting bigger," James boomed, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Maybe next year this party will be for another one from Emma and Luke?" He intentionally emphasized my and Luke's names, twisting the knife in my wound. The room erupted in laughter. The sound was like poisoned arrows hitting me straight in the heart. I looked at Luke. He was still standing there, giving that weak smile, clinking glasses with his brother, with no intention of stepping in or defending me. In my eyes, he was no longer my husband, but a spineless, heartless coward. I felt like a lonely street lamp in a hurricane, standing firm but shattered inside. The tears didn't fall, but my heart was breaking. I pulled Luke onto the balcony. I asked him, "Do you still see me as your wife?" I grabbed Luke's wrist, pulling him to the balcony where some potted plants were arranged haphazardly. The cold Brooklyn wind was blowing through my hair, but it wasn't as cold as the empty stare of the man I called my husband. "Do you still see me as your wife?" My voice was trembling, trying to hold on to the last bit of hope that he would take my side. Just this once. Luke frowned, annoyance etched on his normally handsome face. "Emma, don't make a scene, they're just messing around," he said, glancing back inside where the party lights were still bright and the laughter was still echoing. Messing around a bitter joke that mocked my deepest pain. "They're not messing with you, Luke, they're messing with my pain." I shot back, my voice full of righteous fury, looking straight into his avoiding eyes. I'd seen that look 100 times when his mother, Ruth, would make a snide comment about my inability to have children. I wanted to see a flash of anger, a hint of protection, anything to show that I wasn't alone. But then, another look appeared. The cold, judgmental stare of my mother-in-law, Ruth, watching us through the glass door. She stood there, glass of wine in hand, a knowing smile on her face, as if she was daring me. Luke noticed her gaze, he shrugged indifferently, and then turned his back, leaving me stranded in the cold wind. I know, tonight, I'm all on my own. That sentence was the final stab to my heart. Just as Luke turned away, I heard Madeline's whisper through the glass. Is she making a scene again? Must want to be the center of attention. I spun around, my eyes locking with Madeline's lection. She gave a little smirk, taking a sip of her wine as if she were enjoying my personal drama. I felt a fire ignite in my chest. Not a fire of desperation, but a fire of long-suppressed rage. I looked down at the red wine in my hand, its deep red color like my own blood and pain. A drop of red wine accidentally fell on the balcony floor. I watched the drop spread, then looked up, my eyes gone cold. And I knew I wasn't sweet anymore. My patience had reached its limit. I took a deep breath, tasting the bitter wine and the bitterness of betrayal. The brittle, careless woman had replaced the sweet, weak wife Luke once knew. I walked back to the party table, not with my usual hesitation, but with an icy glare. I picked the nearest chair, right next to the center of the room where the chatter was loudest. Madeline was still smiling, a barely hidden triumphant smile. Ruth Bennett was still whispering to the other women, occasionally glancing over at me, no doubt gossiping about my infertility and the shame I'd brought to their financial dynasty. I sighed not out of exhaustion or resignation, but because a decision had been brewing in my head. My fingers scrolled through my phone, finding Rachel's number. "Save me. Brooklyn. Now." I sent the text, then looked up and stared straight at Ruth, my eyes no longer showing deference but defiance. She stopped talking, her sharp eyes meeting mine, but I didn't flinch. This game, tonight, was no longer one-sided. Rachel texted back, 5 minutes. Stay put, I'm bringing the fire." My fingers trembled as I read Rachel's text. The words on the screen were like a lightning bolt through the gloom in my heart. 5 minutes. Stay put. I'm bringing the fire. I let out a laugh. For the first time during this hellish evening, I gave a real laugh. It was a small laugh, but it was full of liberation and a bit of madness. I put my half-empty glass down on the table with a decisive thud. My whole body felt a rush of new energy. I stood up and walked over to the mobile bar in the corner, where bottles of sparkling wine shimmered under the chandelier. I poured myself another glass, not to get drunk, but to feel the sharp burn in my mouth. My eyes swept past Luke, who was talking with James, past Ruth, who was still absorbed in her gossip, and past Madeline, with her victorious smile. I took a sip of the wine. It was bitter, but exciting. If they wanted me to be a sideshow, I would give them a show worth paying for. This show would have no tears or weakness, but the explosion of an Emma Parker they had never seen before. A mysterious smile crept across my face as I swirled the wine in my glass, waiting for the fire Rachel had promised to bring. I raised my glass and walked to the center of the party. Cheers to the Bennett family. With a full glass in hand, I stood up and walked to the center of the party hall. Every step was deliberate, without a hint of hesitation or fear. The crystal chandelier shone down on me, making me the center of attention. The jazz music suddenly got softer, then stopped. All eyes were on me, filled with curiosity and surprise. I raised my glass high, my voice echoing across the rooftop. Cheers to the Bennett family. The room fell into an eerie silence. Everyone looked at each other, probably wondering if I was drunk, or if this was some kind of stunt. Luke, standing next to James, went pale. Madeline's eyes widened, her fake smile frozen on her face. I continued, my voice clear and defiant, every word a bullet aimed at their pride. "Thanks for proving I don't belong here." Immediately, my mother-in-law, Ruth Bennett, stood up. Her face was flushed with rage, her eyes sharp enough to cut through me. Emma, what do you think you're doing? Her voice was a low growl, full of power and disbelief. I looked her straight in the eyes, not flinching. A small, contemptuous smile played on my lips. Just telling it like it is, Mom. I held her gaze, unwavering. The whole party seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. I knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. Rachel pushed the glass door open. She was a storm in a winter party. Just then, the large glass doors of the rooftop swung open. A gust of cold wind swept in, carrying the familiar scent of Rachel's perfume. She walked in a form-fitting black leather dress, a black wool coat draped over her shoulders, and her eyeliner sharp as a knife. Rachel strode in like a hurricane in the dead of winter, heading straight for me, ignoring all the surprised and annoyed stares being thrown her way. Rachel snapped her fingers at me, a mysterious smile on her face. "Showtime, Emma. Let's bounce." Her voice was loud and clear enough for everyone to hear. Luke, who had recovered from my cheers, glared at me. "Emma! You're not thinking of leaving in the middle of the party, are you?" he hissed, his face pale with anger and fear of being embarrassed. I smirked, my eyes meeting Luke's, no longer filled with fear or pleading. "You go ahead and toast your golden child," I said, my voice cold as ice. I turned and walked toward Rachel, leaving behind the shocked faces of the Bennett family and the whispers that had started to spread across the room. Madeline cut me off. "Emma, don't embarrass the family." As Rachel and I turned to leave, Madeline suddenly stepped in, blocking our exit. Her face was no longer triumphant. It was worried and angry. "Emma, don't embarrass the family," she whispered, but her eyes were full of threats. It was clear that my leaving like this was unacceptable to the Bennett name. Rachel let out a cold, challenging chuckle. She put her arm around my shoulder, leaning in to whisper, "You want me to take this one?" I felt a strange new confidence surge through me, having Rachel by my side. Rachel looked Madeline up and down, a look of pure contempt on her face. "Don't worry, honey. Your family's face was gone a long time ago." Her voice was sharp as a razor. Madeline was speechless, her face turning red with shame and anger. Just then, my mother-in-law, Ruth, rushed over, grabbing Luke's arm tightly. "You forbid her to go!" Her voice was commanding, as if she were giving an order for a piece of furniture. Luke looked at me, confused and a little afraid. I let out a long breath, a feeling of liberation filling my chest. I looked Ruth straight in the eyes, my voice firm and icy. "Sorry, nobody can hold me back anymore." I removed Rachel's arm from my shoulder, taking a step forward, ready to face whatever came next. Luke grabbed my arm. Biggest mistake of the night. As soon as I said that, Luke lunged at me. His hand seized my wrist, his grip tight. It was a reaction born of anger and helplessness. Biggest mistake of the night, not because he hurt me, but because he touched my final limit. He hissed, his face twisted with fury. "Emma, you're causing a scene!" His eyes were full of blame and a hint of fear. He was afraid of his mother's eyes, of the entire Bennett dynasty's eyes, all fixed on us. I gave a faint smile, a smile that I knew would make him shiver. "If you touch me again, I'll really cause a scene," I whispered, every word a clear threat. I looked him dead in the eyes, unwavering, and he flinched. Immediately, Rachel pushed Luke's hand hard off my wrist. Her strength was surprising. Rachel pulled me toward the big glass doors leading to the balcony. A blast of cold Brooklyn wind hit my face. It was freezing, but it also brought a sense of freedom I had never felt before. My lungs filled with cold air, and suddenly, I knew I was finally free. Before I walked out, I turned back to look at Ruth, the woman who taught me what malice was. The Brooklyn wind was still in my hair, carrying with it freedom and resolve. Just before stepping through the fateful door, I stopped. I turned, my eyes scanning the gossiping crowd, searching for one face Ruth Bennett's Tajan. The woman who taught me what malice was, who turned my marriage into a living hell, now stood there, her face a mix of rage and panic. I took a deep breath, my voice clear enough for everyone in that fancy party to hear. "Thanks for the party. But I think, starting tomorrow, I'm giving the Bennetts back their most precious gift, freedom from their name." Every word I spoke was a ringing bell, a final declaration of the end of my confined life. Ruth gritted her teeth, her face pale with fury. "You'll regret this, Emma," she growled, full of threats. I smiled, a real smile with no strain or pain. "Regret? Nope. I only regret that I put up with it for so long." With that, I turned my back, feeling a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. The rooftop door was waiting for me, and on the other side was a whole world of freedom. Rachel and I walked down the rooftop stairs. Behind us, the confused whispers grew louder. Rachel took my arm, pulling me toward the stairs leading down from the rooftop. Every step felt light, as if I was floating. Behind us, the whispers started to grow louder and more chaotic. The lavish party that the Bennetts had worked so hard to host had become a complete mess. I faintly heard Madeline's voice, full of panic and disbelief. "She's not kidding." Her voice was sharp, a late admission of my change. Then I heard Luke's voice, trying to follow us, full of pleading and desperation. Emma, come back. We need to talk. He still thought a few words, a few empty apologies, could bring me back. Rachel sneered, giving me a look of pure disdain. He thinks you're still the weak one, huh? I didn't answer, just breathed deeply. I lifted the heel of my high-heeled shoe, each step firm and strong. My fingers scrolled through my phone, finding a number I'd saved long ago but never dared to call. I dialed, putting the phone to my ear, my voice steady. Lawyer, I need divorce papers first thing tomorrow. The stairs kept taking us farther away from the hell called Bennett and toward a new beginning. We hailed a cab. Rachel asked, "You okay?" I looked at the New York night sliding by the window. We didn't bother waiting for the elevator. Rachel and I walked straight out of the building, grabbing a cab right away. The cab door slammed shut, completely cutting off the noise and fake luxury of the rooftop party. Rachel turned to me, her eyes filled with worry but also pride. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the cab window, where the New York night was passing by like a slow-motion movie. The sparkling lights of the skyscrapers, the rushing traffic, it all felt so alien, but at the same time, so familiar. A strange sense of peace spread through me, a feeling I had lost a long time ago. "I'm good," I said, my voice soft but sure. For the first time in 5 years, I'm actually good. I turned to Rachel, a genuine smile on my face. Rachel smiled back, giving me a friendly punch on the shoulder. "You're a badass." I shook my head. "No, I just decided to stop being a puppet," I said, my eyes firm. Now, I was the one writing the script for my own life, and the next chapter was definitely going to be a lot brighter. When we got to Rachel's apartment, I got the first text from Luke. "I'm sorry. Come home." The cab stopped in front of Rachel's apartment building. As soon as we stepped inside, my phone buzzed. I knew instantly who it was. I unlocked the screen and the first text from Luke popped up. "I'm sorry. Come home." The two late words of "I'm sorry" and the "come home" demand, as if I was still his obedient wife, made me feel both amused and disgusted. I didn't reply. Instead, I put my phone down on the table, went straight to the fridge, and pulled out the bottle of red wine Rachel had waiting. I uncorked it, filled 2 glasses, and raised my glass to clink with Rachel's. "We don't need a late apology," I said, my eyes full of resolve. This was no time to accept any half-hearted apologies. Rachel smiled, putting on some soft jazz music. The smooth melody filled the room, soothing the tension we had just been through. We sat by the big window, looking out at the sparkling Manhattan night. The brilliant, luxurious lights were no longer a symbol of being apart. They were a symbol of a new future, where I was free to be myself. In that peaceful moment, I opened my phone and sent a text to my lawyer. I need his signature. The sooner, the better. The next morning, Ruth showed up at my agency. The next morning, as I walked into my agency in Manhattan, a surprising scene was waiting for me in the lobby. Ruth Bennett, my mother-in-law, was standing there, a powerful presence. She was wearing an expensive mink coat, her arms crossed, her eyes scanning the lobby with an air of arrogance and displeasure. My employees started whispering, curious about the sudden appearance of this society matriarch. She didn't wait. She immediately walked up to me and held out a thick envelope. Her voice was a low growl, but she tried to maintain a fake calm. "Emma, you can't do this insane thing. You'll ruin the Bennett name." I knew for a fact that the envelope contained a large sum of money or some kind of contract to buy my silence. I took the envelope, feeling its thickness in my hand, and calmly handed it back to her. My eyes were steady, looking right into Ruth's. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm just giving back something I never belonged to," I said, each word a dagger aimed at her pride. Ruth Bennett's face turned purple, and she was speechless. At noon, Luke was waiting for me in the lobby, holding a bouquet of white flowers. Same old trick. At noon, as I stepped out of the elevator to go to lunch, a familiar figure was waiting for me in the lobby. It was Luke, holding a bouquet of pure white roses, his face full of remorse. Same old trick, I thought to myself, a wave of weariness washing over me. He was always like this. After his family hurt me, he would show up with flowers and empty apologies. He bowed his head, his voice a pathetic whisper. "Emma, I'm so sorry. They didn't mean it." This familiar lie made me feel sick. I looked deep into the eyes of the man who once swore to protect me, the man who was once my whole world. Now, in his eyes, there was only weakness and fear. "You had a chance to stand up for me that night, Luke, and you didn't." My voice was cold and emotionless. He grabbed my hand, his hand trembling, trying to hold on to a shred of hope. "Just give me one more chance to fix this." I pulled my hand out of his cold grasp, firm and strong. "You let your mom control you, but you're not going to control me anymore." I turned my back and walked away, leaving Luke and his pathetic white flowers standing alone in the lobby. Now, freedom was the only thing I craved. That night, Luke knocked on Rachel's door. I didn't open it. Rachel yelled, "Get lost, Luke!" That night, as I was dozing off in Rachel's cozy apartment, A frantic knock and a persistent doorbell startled me awake. I knew instantly it was Luke. He still wouldn't give up. I looked at the door, with no intention of opening it. Rachel, her face groggy but still fierce, rushed to the door. She didn't open it, she just snarled through the thick wooden door. "Get lost, Luke." Rachel's voice was powerful and uncompromising. I stood behind the door, clearly hearing Luke's voice from outside, which sounded desperate but still arrogant. "Emma, you can't live without me." He still believed that I was his dependent, a weak woman who couldn't stand on her own. I let out a cold, dismissive laugh. As his voice faded into the quiet New York night, I said softly, just loud enough for Rachel and me to hear, "You're wrong. You're the one who can't live without a breeding doll." Now, I had completely broken free from his shadow and his family's, finally finding the freedom I had longed for. A week later, I met my lawyer. A clean divorce paper was placed in front of Luke in the cold office. A week later, the atmosphere in the lawyer's office was even colder than that Brooklyn night. I sat across from Luke. Between us was a dark wooden table and a clean, crisp divorce paper. My lawyer sat next to me, his face professional and calm. Luke looked at the paper, his face pale, his expression a mix of anger and fear. He hesitated for a long time, then looked up at me, his voice trembling slightly. "Emma, are you sure?" His eyes were still full of disbelief and an attempt to hold on. I nodded, without a moment's hesitation. I've never been more sure. Now, all doubts and fears had disappeared. I knew this was the only right decision. I signed my name on the document, my signature firm and strong. Then, I pushed the pen toward him. Luke was silent, staring at the paper as if it were a death sentence. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. But finally, he signed. His shaky signature was placed next to my clear one. I smiled, a real smile, full of liberation and strength. I closed the file, placing it neatly on the table. "Thank you for signing. And thank you for teaching me how expensive freedom is." I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. This was my new beginning. I walked out of the office building. The New York sun hit my face. It was cold, but bright. I walked out of the lawyer's office, where just a few minutes ago, an old chapter of my life had closed. The brilliant New York sun hit my face, still a little chilly from the late afternoon, but incredibly bright. I tilted my head up, looking at the clear blue sky, filling my lungs with fresh air, feeling the warm rays on my skin. "Brooklyn, Manhattan, it's all still here," I murmured, as if talking to myself. "Only I'm free." The name Bennett no longer weighed on my shoulders. Rachel was waiting for me by her car, leaning against the door, a knowing smile on her face. "So what are you going to do now?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed in the busy street. "Celebrate. With a bottle of wine that costs more than my old wedding ring," I said. Then walked quickly toward Rachel, feeling like my life had just begun. I'm Emma Parker, and it took me 5 years to learn one simple thing. Don't let anyone write the script for your life. Brooklyn will still host hundreds of baby showers, the Bennetts will still toast, Ruth will still give orders, Madeline will still smirk, but I won't be there to take it anymore. I've learned that no fancy party is more valuable than being myself. They can see me as a piece of jewelry, a failed womb, a barren doll, but from now on, I no longer belong to those fake parties. New York is still cold, still lit up, and I, finally, have found my own light. The light of freedom, of independence, and of an Emma Parker who is no longer chained. True value lies in daring to be yourself and fighting for your freedom, instead of accepting definitions or constraints from others. Emma Parker learned that no fancy party is more valuable than being herself. She rejected all judgment and control, choosing to liberate herself from social pressures and a toxic relationship. Her journey is a strong affirmation of self-determination, the courage to face the truth, and the power of finding your own light in the big city.